If the US pulls away from NATO, as their commander-in-chief, the budget Dorito has suggested, the UK may have to step up to more than people realise. And with Donald Trump saying he's absolutely considering that move, the question becomes, are we actually prepared for it? I'm Sean.
And I'm Chris.
And this is the Blue Collar Workers, what politics actually means for working people in the UK. I genuinely think NATO's on its last legs.
What do you mean, in fact, of it being opposed by
realistically, it's not.
States?
The United States plows so much into NATO that NATO is basically fucked. If the US pulls out, and we have to acknowledge that, the apparatus, the satellite networks, the communications, a lot of what America does is what's between the NATO allies, not just the NATO allies. They do the supply shipments, they do the equipment shipments, they do all of the other stuff that the rest of the other militaries can't do. So to say that NATO...
Is there a possibility we could buy shit that's used for NATO off America?
Budget Dorito.
Budget Dorito.
I mean, have you seen what Donald Trump's like?
Yeah. They'll probably turn around and ask for like $2 trillion for it.
Yeah, I'm saying, he's fucking mad. He is going to be the person responsible for the destruction of NATO. NATO is the bedrock of Western hegemony. It is. And I don't think America understands that. I don't think the American people understand that the airspace, the reason that Donald Trump is doing so badly in the Straits of Hormuz and what's going on in Iran now is because Europe feels slighted over what happened with Greenland, with the way that the budget Dorito has treated everybody. That's my nickname for him now.
Budget Dorito. He didn't actually get Greenland, did he?
No. He's talking about purchasing a strip for a military base. That's considered, I don't know if it's an embassadical kind of position, like it's embassy territory.
Yeah, that'd be embassy territory, that would be.
I think so. I think that's the arrangement. I don't know. The negotiations are still ongoing. The problem that Donald Trump has is he has upset so many of his allies, Chris, that his allies have told him, oh, you went to war with Israel? You and Israel sort it. And that proves that America isn't the superpower she used to be, because without Europe and the European powers, bases, operations, he's struggling with Iran. Now, Iran is a big regional power, but Iran is not.
So basically, budget Dorito.
You like it, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
And just so you're aware, and I want to give out credit, Count Deadliest, someone I've been wanting on our podcast for some time. He's a big TikToker. He has quite a fucking huge platform. He coined the word budget Dorito, and I loved it. And I thought, that's it, I've got to use that. But yeah, the budget Dorito, Donald fucking Trump.
He doesn't acknowledge the fact that it isn't just him in it.
That's the thing. He thinks America can do everything.
It's a partnership.
And because he doesn't realise that America cannot project itself as a superpower without... It's not like the British Empire. You see, the British Empire, those were British bases. If we roll back to the 1870s, Britain had ports and flags everywhere. Long before America rose, those were British. They answered to British troops. They had British command structure. They were all centralised. America doesn't have that. America has allied bases everywhere.
Do we have the power to go back to that?
No.
Is it possible to do that?
For Britain to return to a empire level footing, we would need to first straighten out our birth rate. Because infantry does everything in today's day. Even with the onset of AI, robots, etc., we are 20, 30 years away from military AI material, real military AI material, where robots do everything. Yeah, and there's some scary stuff.
That's called drone sort of robots, where we still control them. But
yeah, but the relative argument or point of that is we're not there. So for us to even think about rebuilding the British Empire, we'd need to have a much vaster birth rate. We'd need a horrific... If you think Britain is struggling now to pay for its military costs, in today's warfare, we'd either have to have super cheap materials, so some kind of invented new alloy that allows us to slap out tanks with fucking ease, or jets, fighters, drones, AI warfare. So birth rate, some form of cheap material that allows us to revolutionise our military. It's no. Because when the British Empire became what it was, we were, and I use this in a loose term, discovering places that had very low populations. America had population, it didn't need discovering, but I'm just using that as a kind of historical coin point. The problem being is when Britain expanded, it was expanding and building communities with it. It built New York. It built many of these other 13 original colonies. So much of that population was built by the British. We had a
recognise that budget Dorito.
He doesn't. He doesn't recognise fucking anything. But the fact of the matter is, we restructured the Indian trade continents to flow back to Britain, and we need to acknowledge that because India was at one point one of the greatest industrial complexes out there. We had the military to take them. We did. We redirected them.
We basically done the foundation for the current Western
world. Absolutely we did. And the problem being is we did it in centuries, Chris. It took us nearly 200 years to build the British Empire. So even if we were to start reinventing, like we had the sciences to have a new alloy that we can print because of computer AIs, that we have the birth rate that can operate the drones. Like let's say we have the drone soldiers now, we can print them. We have a robotics factory and the drones come off and we're capable of conquering Europe. Hypothetically, let's just use Europe as an example. We need the drone operators. There's going to be between 100 200,000 of them. We need to train them. They need to be of medical age. They need to be mentally strong enough to deal with what the robot soldiers are going to do, because the robot soldiers are going to shoot real human beings, and you're going to see that in the feed. So you've got to do that. You're going to have.
I think that's where we lack at the moment.
Yeah, of course. No one is willing to do what empire building requires. This is why America keeps going back to the Middle East, because everyone's desensitized to bombs being dropped in the Middle East. But if Budget Dorito dropped a bomb in fucking Europe, his own base would kill him.
Damn.
His own base. Because bombing brown people has been mentally decentralized. Yeah? Bombing white people is a serious fucking thing. When the war was going on, you know, the Bosnian conflict, that was world fucking news when me and you were in our 20s. World fucking news. It would still be world news if, let's say, Britain and France had a conflict now. Massive world news. Everybody would pay attention because the world media is very Western white centric, and you just have to say that. It's hard to say it, but it has to be said. A conflict in the middle of Europe, and this is why the Ukrainian conflict has reached such a media group. This is why, as President Putin said quite recently, if he had done to the Ukrainians what the Israelis had done to the Palestinians, NATO would be in Moscow, and he fucking knows it, and the world knows it. Because it's a hypocrisy. There is a big hypocrisy in that. What the Israelis have done to the Palestinians, there is no way, under any circumstances, France, Germany, Britain would allow Moscow to do that to the Ukrainians. And Putin knows this. And Putin called out on that bullshit. And that's why I do greatly respect Vladimir Putin for who he is. And I know that seems a little bit hypocritical, but the man is at least fucking honest. Yeah, and I'm not saying he isn't a warlord, he isn't bad for Europe, he is. But he is honest about him being, you know, you can be an evil fucker and still be an honest evil fucker. The problem is our political leaders lie to us all the fucking time, continuously.
And when have they actually told the truth?
Very rarely. I mean, when we talk about really important matters, small matters is where they tell the truth. Things that aren't, you know, world economically important. Like, can you name the companies that are helping to finance the Jewish settlements in Gaza Strip?
No.
You wouldn't even know how to look them up because of how many algorithms and how much of the online community covers up what they're doing. You could probably Google search what companies are looking to invest.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the agenda of the Data Protection Act.
Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? So there is so much bullshit that is wrapped around.
Child Protection Act.
Yeah. Starmer is honest. Everyone knows this. But from the points I'm trying to make involving how it has a direct impact on the UK, going back towards, for us to have a military that we could restore our empire, even in an AI age, it would take 2 generations. And that's fast when you're talking about building empires, planetary scanning. You'd need at least 2. You need a generation of this. You need to sensitize women to have children. You've got to tell them they're building a future. You've got to finance them to do that. You basically, you as the Chancellor, Chris, have got to turn around and hold a gun to the bank's head and say, I'm billing you this much tax. You don't pay it, I seize your assets. We get monstrous to the corporate world. We have to. That's how you do it. You use your nukes, you hide behind your nukes. Well, firstly, we come to power, we're nice, we're kind, we're gentle. And then you bolster your entire nuclear stockpile. You build a core of dedicated, loyal party members who are part of the military. Yeah? And then you just turn around and hold a gun to the corporate head and say, you're paying 55% tax. No riders. I don't care. You'll do as you're told or you'll lose everything. And then you turn around and say to single mothers, the young women in their 20s to 30s, you say, I will pay you 90 grand a year to have 4 kids until the last one leaves the house at 18.
That would certainly boost the population.
It doesn't matter what colour your race is, your creed, or anything like that. You say to every woman in Britain of breedable age from 20 to 30, that's what you do it. You give her a breeder card. She now is paid for by the state to have 4 children. They will be educated, and they will be the children we would then draw our future military from, if you're building an empire. And then from that pool of vast extra manpower, you then have new drone operators, specialist tanks, seizures, commandos, and what you need. And the only place you can go in a new world like this, you'd have to attack it, Europe. You'd have to. I mean, I'm giving you from where the geography of Britain is. We'd start in Ireland, we'd make some kind of case that Ireland is aiding the IRA, and you'd invade Ireland on those pretexts. You take Ireland. Europe would see that coming, let's be fair. Europe would absolutely see this coming. But you'd have to basically militarise very quickly. You'd need some kind of fabricated material, because everything we need metal-wise is imported. So you need a material at home that you don't need to go out to build all your machinery from. Some kind of advanced fabrication. So this is an entirely fantasy-based item. I apologise, ladies, I'm getting a bit of a historical tangent here. But you'd need that material to roll off a production line, and then you could move out. And then you take Normandy. You then say that France would be better part of becoming a part of the Angevin Empire. You'd crown probably one of the younger heirs of Prince William, because the king would probably object, because in the way in his lifestyle, he's been seeing a collapsing empire, and it's a managed collapsing empire that he has been told by his mother to do. You'd probably have to get rid of the king. These are horrible things that I wouldn't want to do. And then you'd have to take over someone like Charlotte, Princess Charlotte, or someone else, get her married towards one of the very loyal party members, and then she, as a teenage queen, we'd expand the empire that way. And you'd have a restore of the British Empire. There'd be millions dead. Millions dead. Europe would have to take a century to restructure, but it could be done. It's just how monstrous would you have to be? Donald Trump, on the other hand, doesn't realise, back towards the very conversation I'm having here, Donald Trump does not realise that his superpower status does not exist without NATO. So his threat to withdraw from NATO harms him. It harms him greatly. It might sound like distant geopolitics, but it directly does affect the UK, because we use so much of Donald Trump, of America's infrastructure. Satellite infrastructure, Five Eyes, that's the spying agency that keeps terrorists and other problems down, telling us when Russia's moving one of their secret, one of their oil tankers through our waters, etc. There's so much we rely on America, and I don't think many Europeans actually understand that on a personal level. NATO is not just a concept, though. It's a backbone of a collective defence in all of Europe. It is the literal groundwork that we live on. But
surely NATO could stand on its own 2 feet for a certain while. No. If
the budget Dorito pulled out tomorrow, Chris, NATO would collapse. I'm under no illusion.
That's going from one end of the spectrum completely.
No. But Chris, he's that kind of person that would pull out. Do you understand what I'm saying? Would give the orders to the military in the European bases to leave Europe.
But then can't we seize those military bases ourselves?
It's not the bases, it's the personnel, it's the equipment.
Yeah, but we can seize the equipment.
What military do you think Europe has the ability to seize the American military forces in Europe?
Unless Poland, I'm sure they'll be happy to help.
No, because America's the biggest arms dealer to keep Russia out. You're forgetting the geopolitics of Poland. I love your thinking, and I love the idea you think from this European idea, but let's take this from a point of view. America is pulling out of Europe. The fucking flames are going everywhere. Europe is being abandoned. Poland won't anger America. America is their arms dealer. America supplies almost all of Poland's weapons. And that's why Russia will never step foot in Poland again. This is why the threat of Russia coming to Europe is not much of a threat, in my opinion. It's more Russia will become Europe's new financial resource position. Those embargoes are going to collapse. The current European political class that we have, they're going to disappear very quickly, because the straits are never going to be reopened. There's nothing the budget Dorito can say about that. Without an agreement with Iran, he could bomb Iran back into the ground. The mines will be there. The Iranians have enough military assets to make the Straits of Hormuz completely inaccessible. Therefore, the world economy will collapse. as me and you know it right now. That's 20% of the world's fuel gone. And Iran can keep that closed forever. And then they can turn on and off the mines as they want for the ships to go through. So you're either paying Iran 1 to 2 million a shipment, or you're making a deal with Russia. And most Europeans will make a deal with Russia.
Until we turn around and drill in the north.
Even drilling in the north, as I looked this up from our previous podcast.
I understand that we would still need a deal with somebody else despite obviously drilling in the north.
We could drill in the north right now. Like Chancellor Christopher, your surname, I don't want to say it on the camera, orders the drilling in the north today. We won't see the oil until August.
But that's where you'd make a deal with somebody else.
That's why. Who has? America is got a nutcase.
It'd have to be Russia.
Exactly. You and I are geopolitically smart enough to say it'd have to be just Russia because that's the cheap oil and the cheap gas. And the Russians would make the deal tomorrow. It's the European current elite who are holding us back. The Russians would make the deal tomorrow. It doesn't matter we've been fighting. We've been fighting. Let's have a vodka. Yeah, there's a trade. Russia would welcome a British fucking deal. Tomorrow it would be all over the Russian media. Russia and British relations have thawed. Putin comes over and shakes Chancellor Christopher's hand.
Damn, that would be a sight.
And just, that's the thing. Because the Russians would want to sell to everyone. They want to feel important. People have underestimated that the Russians have always been a major power in our sphere. And it was the hegemony of America that has always threatened them. When me and you grew up in the Cold War, Russia was always a power. Our grandparents grew up with Russian Empire. Great-grandparents for you, grandparents for me. Being the slightly older one of us too. And even then, my grandparents would have been young children during the Russian Empire. But do you understand what I'm saying? Russia has always been a major part of Europe. It's unavoidable.
They're our neighbours, basically.
Yeah, they are Europe's neighbours. Yeah. And they've always been the major power next to Europe. Now, Europe has had small to medium empires, and some of them have gone really globally because of the inventions of empires. But as Europe has now shrunk, both politically, economically, sociopolitically, militarily, the multipolar system, Europe is not, in my opinion, capable of becoming a superpower. I don't believe it is. For the key factor that Spain, Portugal, France, even Germany to a lesser extent, Italy, Britain, we have all had empires. And we are all incredibly proudful tribal people. You are trying to build a federation out of what? Let's say 12 ex-imperial powers.
I reckon it's possible.
Yes, if you can put a gun to everyone's head.
No, I reckon negotiations will work.
Chris, it hasn't. The French and the Spaniards are always complaining about something. The French and the Germans squabble from time to time. The Italians and Germans squabble from time to time. We've left the pack. There is a group of people in every fucking country I just mentioned who wants to return to their great independent nationalism. The current Prime Minister of Italy is probably the most nationalistic that Italy's ever had. The AfD have almost taken over Germany. You know of the French far right, don't you? The ones who want to kick all of the fucking migrants off the Calais into Britain. We've got Nigel Farage. There is a nationalist group in every European power. Historically speaking, the idea to create us as a European Union has to come from an existential, real-world threat. We're not we have problems with the oil problems, but we're not threatened by them. We're going to struggle, we're going to have issues, we're going to have shortages, but they're not an existential threat to Europe. You'd have to have an existential threat to Europe to make these European ex-imperial units. The Italians had an empire, and I'm not on about Rome, I'm talking about Italy. Italy had its own financial in Africa. You had the Spanish had their own empire, because we took over most of their fucking empire. The Portuguese had their own trade empire. The Dutch-Portuguese East Indies Empire, that was founded by them. British had an empire, French had an empire. Napoleon was one of their last emperors. That's not even that long ago. No. You know what I'm saying? Germany, we had Hitler in living memory. The Russian emperors, you don't know much about the Russian emperors, but they were massive powers. Europe has had massive powers. Building a European Union to become a superpower, I think, is impossible unless there is a truly unquestionable existential threat, like America becoming hostile to Europe. Really hostile. You know, like dropping bombs and commando raids into fucking Europe.
Basically a world war.
I don't think France and Britain would actually use their nukes for the rest of Europe. There's a controversy for you. Because the political and economical elite of Britain and France think that even if America was to occupy Italy, it wouldn't be enough. I don't believe the economical elites of our country and France give a flying fuck about what's going on outside their country directly. I don't personally think if Donald Trump's elitists made a deal with London that Trump was to invade parts of Scotland, that the Londoners would give a fuck. That's the mindset. They see me and you and 90% of the country as cattle, to be traded, to be bartered, financed and slaughtered as necessary. And that's not an unfair. That isn't an unfair assessment of what billionaires think of normal Britons. British billionaires think of normal. I'm talking about British billionaires. I'm not even talking about international billionaires. British billionaires think of that as the British people. And this is why I think it's nigh on impossible to create a European federation unless there is a genuine existential threat. And the budget to Rito hasn't caused one. And he's angered a lot of these elitists by the way he's talked to them, the way he's talked down to them. And many of these elitists have fucked off with him so that when he's asked for their help to sort out, they've laughed at him. They've basically told him, they haven't said fuck you, but they're saying fuck you.
They're basically saying fuck you by not signing the
Exactly.
Check.
And because they haven't come to help him and Israel, Israel has now realised, they say Netanyahu is now realising unquestionably how much America needs Europe.
Hence the reason I swear Israel's trying to kiss our ass.
Israel's trying to kiss all of Europe's ass at the moment. The problem
I'm really hoping we'll all turn around and saying fuck you to Israel.
I think, Chris, we're at a generational cusp. We are at the point where the European Union and Britain and Europe in general, all the European nations, are on the cusp that the next generation, mine and your generation, where me and you and our generation becomes politicians, because we're not, we're the end of the working generation. Yeah. You know, we're in our 40s, so we're the back end of the working generation. We're nearly about to come into power in terms of we will have CEOs of our generation, we will have executives of our generation, we will have politicians of our generation. The boomers are going. They're the ones above us. They are practically finished. And once the boomer generation is finished across Europe, there will not be a Zionism in Europe. It'll be non-existent. Because we, the Europeans, understand acutely that many of the, let's be fucking racist about this, many of the tribes that are fleeing the bombs are fleeing Zionist bombs. They're fleeing Israel's bombs. Because much of this mass movement into Europe is coming from Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon. The Middle East, which is being carpet bombed by Israel. So Israel is one of the core factors of the migration problems that the Europeans are having. And if the European elite do truly care about migration, as they talk that they do, Israel has to basically lose its privileged accesses in Europe. And the boomers don't want to talk about that. They don't even want to think about it. But mine and your generation will say, no, fuck them. We've got to look after our own now. And we've got to solve the problems that are in Europe. So our generation across the European spectrum, from Italy, remember how young the Prime Minister of Italy is? She's just slightly older than me and you. Yeah. I think she's late 40s, early 50s. So she's of our group. She's a Gen Xer. So the Gen Xers are coming in now. In America right now, talking about that very point about the changing of generations, the governor, or the future governor of Florida, wants to divest from everything from Israel. The future governor of the mayor of New York has already cut all financial ties from Israel.
So the latest generation is starting going, I've had enough of you.
Yeah, exactly. This is why Israel has pushed America and Europe and all of its allies into this conflict, because they know there won't be a chance in the next generation. Netanyahu wanted this war with Iran solely because he knew he couldn't get it next generation. The next set of politicians, there's not the oomph.
They're all like, I've had enough of you. I'm fed up dealing foreign affairs. I need to focus on our own. Which is true to the statement.
Absolutely.
In order to take care of others, you first need to
take care of your own, as you've said many times. Yeah. But I still think people are jumping too quickly to the worst case scenario here. We as Europeans are not as badly affected by this, but it will have a knock-on effect. as we crawl into April, our oil reserves are going to dry up. This is where the crunch time with Russia comes. Do we, so you're sat here across the table, do you sacrifice Ukraine to Russia to get oil pipelines? Would you make that deal? Knowing your industries are going to close, your factories are going to shut down, and we're weeks away from that now, Chris.
It depends on how much of Ukraine.
No, I mean the whole fucking thing. If I'm pretending to be Russia, I want to tell who rules Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't join Europe, doesn't join NATO. I give you all oil, free, cheap price. You surrender Ukraine. You see the difference. We are at the cusp of that conversation, Chris.
I'll have to take the hit.
Of course. That's that. Because Western Europe is on its fucking knees in its oil reserves. By the end of April to the early May, we won't have any oil reserves.
But then I'll counteract with another thing. You take Ukraine, you don't step any foot further.
Of course he wouldn't, because he can't. He knows we're all allies. There are 2 nuclear powers. He's not an idiot. Of course, we drink vodka. I don't want war with you. I want business with you. He wants to do business with France and Britain. He wants to be seen as the next, the up-and-coming European ally. Russia wants to be our military ally, wants to be our guarantor, wants to rebuild via that. He knows that. He knows that 20% of the population that fled Russia during these conflicts are in Europe. So that when he puts on this new face of Russia, the friendly European Russia, they come home. He recovers his population problems. Some of them will come home with husbands and wives. Because he took a massive hit of his youth. They fled mostly to Europe. Some have gone to America and they're probably gone forever. He's probably never going to see them again.
But then,
unless America does implode. And the argument there is that America is on the cut. I think America could implode.
I reckon America will implode the moment we make a deal with Russia.
No. America's implosion will happen
When Israel falls.
No. America's implosion, in my opinion, will happen when Donald Trump tries to invade Iran in ground forces. Because if he does, if he tries to physically invade Russia, and the ख़ामोश Island isn't Ukraine enough. That's not going to cause it. He can do that with commandos. I mean, if he has to cross the 19 million population and try to occupy Iran, he won't. He physically won't be able. That will be the end of Donald Trump and America as a superpower. And that's what Israel wants. Netanyahu wants an occupation force. Degrading isn't enough. They're not going to remove the regime. They can't remove the regime without ground invasion. They cannot take Iran's regime out without putting 500,000 men on the ground.
Why does Israel want to freaking take everyone over anyway?
Because Israel is a xenophobic, isolationistic, supremacist ideology that wants to rule and control everything in its region so it can expand into greater Israel. It wants to erase Jordan, Lebanon, parts of Egypt, parts of Saudi Arabia, all the way up to Israel, to Iran's border. There are 4 countries between Israel and Iran right now.
Damn.
So do you understand? Israel has this dream of a superpower in the Middle East.
So they're trying to build their own empire.
Of course they are. And they're making us sacrifice men, women and children for it.
Fuck off.
And that's why I give Stemmer his due in being smart enough to say fuck off. Because he hasn't done us badly when it comes to foreign affairs. He's a terrible domestic prime minister. We all know that. We've all acknowledged that he's a terrible fucking domestic prime minister. The security systems involving America's behaviour right now will fall one by one. NATO is not capable of swallowing this overnight. I think it will disappear. I think it will collapse. I think NATO is now dead. Europe needs to look for its self-defense. And we just saw in the news, what was it, yesterday, the day before, from recording from this, that the Prime Minister was talking about closer military ties with Europe. Closer than normal. And I think we are going to see a breakdown of what NATO's collapse is going to happen. America will either implode, at which point the American troops that are in Europe will do one of 2 things. They might be absorbed into Europe, offered deals. If Europe is smart, we might. So if America has an implosion. The ground invasion in Iran happens. That fails. They lose hundreds of thousands. There are protesters in every street. Donald Trump deploys the National Guard. America falls into civil war. That is a very possible scenario. I'm tired of people saying that that's not. That is still a possible scenario because Donald Trump is brought into a ground invasion in Iran. He will not win to opening the Straits of Hormuz without an invasion. It's not possible. And he won't even be able to keep 𝐾𝐨𝐽 Island if he invades it with ground forces because they might sneak across at night in rubber boats. They only have to sneak a couple of thousand IRG troops and America might lose the island entirely, have hundreds of captives, public fucking news. There is no stomach in America for mass casualties. The problem being is mass casualties is the only way you're taking a power like Iran out. Survival is Iran's only goal. Iran has achieved it. Iran will achieve it, in my opinion. I'm not even I can't stand the Ayatollahship. I'm not a Shia. I don't like the Shias in terms of their political authority. As my Muslim brothers, alhamdulillah, we can disagree. You know what I'm saying? That's a religious disagreement. But on a political scan, the Shias are nightmarish. Let's be quite fair about this. They genuinely wish harm for the Western world. But when you look at what it will cost, if I have to choose between paying the Ayatollah 2 million a barrel for his ships or making a deal with Russia, we're making a deal with Russia. Because the deal with Russia benefits us better.
Will make us stronger as well.
Yeah, it would. Because the Russians want, the Russians to have a good relationship with Britain, France, Germany is their goal. That's their goal.
Wouldn't that now make us a stronger front against
Absolutely.
the East?
Absolutely. But it means bringing Russia in from the fucking night. And we've only put it out in the night because the Americans have demanded it.
Screw that, bring Russia in. I'd rather have own security than...
Absolutely, Chris, completely. And I completely agree with you.
It seems most Russians I've met over here, they're saint.
The Russian people, the Russians have been the European large bear ally and enemy for 1,000 years. Since the formation of the Russian Empire. You know, 1200, the Mongols lost. About 1300, the Mongols lost their empire. And when that empire collapsed, that was with the rise of the real Russian bear. So about 1400s. You know, end of the Middle Ages, coming into the Renaissance. And since then, probably for the last 600 to 700 years, Russia has been the major focal point of all European powers. So you can understand historically why that pisses the Russians off, that this other continental power is on their fucking back door. Europe, which is their back door. So of course, from the Russians' perspective, and maybe that does make me pro-Russian, but I believe in what's good for Britain. And what's good for Britain right now is making a deal with Russia, a good deal with Russia, that gets us cheap oil, cheap gas, cheap materials, allows us to rebuild our fucking goddamn industries from within Britain. Cheap uranium. Fucking dirt cheap uranium.
God, I said they got fucking loads of
They
it.
got everything we need. Everything.
Why the fuck haven't we made a deal with them already?
Because it's Vladimir Putin. And most of the political class of Europe don't want to do a deal with Vladimir Putin.
So it's the fact they've been swayed by America.
No. Chris, they've been backwards and forwards stabbing the man in the back.
Isn't that the generation which is slowly being replaced?
Yeah, of course. Yes, of course. They are the boomers, because of American media, American power, American money. The boomers are all in on, we're the Western hegemony. We're not. We're America's bitch. We have always been America's bitch. Europe has always been America's bitch, and we're slowly now finding our spine to tell America to fuck off. And that's the reality. That is the barefaced reality. We were America's bitch, and we're now finding the backbone to tell them to fuck off.
Do you reckon the rest of Europe would fall in line with Britain if Britain told America to fuck off?
Yeah. If 𝐾𝐨𝐽 was...
I know for a fact it ain't going to be 𝐾𝐨𝐽, but
No.
if we got...
Hypothetically speaking, tomorrow morning, 𝐾𝐾𝐨 is given some unfucking reasonable demands by Donald Trump to the point where it snaps him. He stands up and says, I am leaving NATO, I am ejecting the Americans, and I'm withdrawing all of our assets, bases, and resources from America. That would be the actual camelback broking. France would follow us within an hour, and the rest of Europe would be like a fucking domino effect. It only takes Britain or France. I think France would be the one that does it. I think I think Macron will tell him to fuck off. I think at some point Macron is going to tell Trump to fuck off. And when he does, it'll then apply such pressure that the Prime Minister will. But if the Prime Minister had the backbone, he would win an election for that. Because it would take the pressure off everyone that we're telling the Americans, look, fuck off, we're tired of you treating us like cunts. If he grew a backbone and did that, it might get him killed, it might get him assassinated. Let's be very, very clear here. The person who takes me and you don't want to be Prime Minister and Chancellor in this time period now. We don't. I'm telling you, you don't. And I love the idea of it. Because we would have to we'd be the ones to swallow the bullet to tell America to fuck off. And America is a falling power. We want to be the Prime Minister and Chancellor when that's done. And then come in to fix the country.
So basically, we need a scapegoat to take the bullet.
Absolutely. And that's what Theresa May was when they left Europe.
She was the scapegoat.
She was the scapegoat.
Starmer. Time to do your duty.
To be fair, if Starmer did it, I would bring me and you into the Labour government, into the Labour Party. Like that would be, we'd be Labour members. We'd be standing at the next election. Because that would be the ballsiest thing that Labour is like, fuck you, Donald Trump. Fuck your alliance. Get the fuck out of our country. We're a nuclear armed nation. That would be his legacy. That could redeem everything he's done.
Then mean you come in, take control, and just sort everything the fuck
out.
Yeah.
That would be, and maybe that's a fantasy point of view to our viewers, but the reality sits unquestionably that America's world power, even as a regional power, is over in Europe. Because Europe has found the balls to tell them to fuck off. And I don't think the Europeans understand the presumptions that what the political class are doing right now. They're basically pulling out of America's sphere. They've had enough. Even Britain has. But I have wombled on now for more than fucking half an hour, old boy. We've got a piece over towards you other than mine. But what I'm going to say as a closing point with in this America pulling out of NATO, do it. Just fucking do it. Because you will not understand how fast, because of how hollow your country is, how little infrastructure you have in your nation, how much your country relies on everything coming to America. I don't think you quite grasp how much of a collapse that backlash will be. Your companies will fold overnight. If you
was an economic crash.
No. We're talking national. To forget the economy. We're not talking 1920s crash here, Chris. We're talking about America collapsing. The pull out of NATO and NATO. So Trump says, "I'm out," pulls out of NATO. Europe then turns around and says, "All of your businesses no longer gain all of their unfair advantages. They now all pay taxes at normal rate."
They're fucked.
Remember, America is nearly something like 38 fucking trillion in debt. If the Europeans then say to him, like, all your companies are now paying normal tax, they might take that. And we will now want to recall on all of our debts. All the loans we gave you, America, we want our money back. America defaults, America doesn't do business with Europe. The standard systems collapse, the banking system collapses. The economical shockwave, America won't recover for a generation. That's why I don't think the budget Dorito quite grasps how fucking serious withdrawing from NATO is for him. But that's me on the budget Dorito, Donald Trump withdrawing from NATO. And I love you, Count Deadliest, for that comment. I really do. And I had to give you a shout out. Over on Chris's side.
Mine's on the case of obviously rejoining the EU single market.
I think it's inevitable. If the EU keeps its shit cool, manages its problems, Britain rejoining is inevitable. And I mean, as part of Europe, not even just the EU market. I think, well, maybe not in our lifetime, Chris. Maybe me and you can stem it off if we can come to power and make a deal with Russia that allows us to bypass the need to return to Europe. And I genuinely believe that would be necessary. I think that a deal with Russia is absolutely on the cards. We have to have one. And I
reckon that would pull Russia into Europe.
Europe and Russia making an alliance is fantasy football under the current political system we have. We'd have to get rid of our older generation of politicians. because they've grown up on hating Russia.
I reckon, because obviously they are on the way out.
Yeah.
We make a deal with Russia. Once that current generation.
The resources, Russia. If Europe collectively turned around and said to Russia, "Let's make a deal. Let's go back to being friends," and I think if we could get all of Europe to agree to this, with Britain returning to the single market, we walk over to Russia. We turn up in Moscow. We send all the political leaders into Moscow, barring the backdoor people with threats of nukes, etc., etc. And we say to Vladimir Putin, "Open market, everything's forgiven, all trade, good relations, alliance. You just keep Crimea." He'd take the Crimea and be out of Ukraine by morning. Because he would see the market benefit to the Russian people of returning towards Europe and all that. Europe needs to put all the trade deals and all the blockades on the table. Tell the Russians, you keep just the Crimea, Europe will recognise it. Zelensky, it is Vladimir Zelensky, isn't it? President of Ukraine. The Ukrainian president resigns. The Ukrainians become the transit between Europe and Russia. Russia gets everything and more for what its deal, and it only keeps land-wise the Crimea. I can tell you the Russians would take that deal. Over fucking night, you would solve 90% of Europe's materials, oil, fuel, gas problems. Russians and Europeans mixing again. It would destroy the American NATO bloc. It would
also upset the Middle East as well.
Well, then the Middle Eastern companies wouldn't be supplying us.
No, that's what I mean. In this case, we've now renegotiated a new supply, which benefits not only just Russia but EU as well. And
the Middle East
eliminates
Chris, the Middle East is fucked.
Yeah.
Iran will not lower those mines.
Then
the Middle East is already fucked. Yeah. They just don't realise that. That's the fundamental problem we're having. The Middle Eastern tribes do not understand that there are not enough minesweepers to clear the mines that are in the Straits now.
Damn.
In the fucking Western fleets. I think one estimate was there's 60,000 mines in the Straits now.
Fucking hell! How the fuck does even anything live there?
Because the mines have digital communications. So if an Iranian officer, an IRG officer, is stood on one of the allied Chinese tankers, he's turning off the mines. The tanker's going through it, which means no other tanker, no other shipping is going through that straits without Iran's permission. Which means all of the old agreements that have gone on via the Middle East. And this is why it ties into us going back to the single market. I think Britain returning to Europe is inevitable. Absolutely inevitable. I don't want to say that from a prideful point of view, I want that because you voted to leave Europe because you wanted your own laws. I think it doesn't matter whether we'll be alive. It might be 20, 30 years down the line, Chris, that Britain re-signs back into the European Union. But if the European Union gets its shit together, fixes its problem with Russia, we don't need the Middle East. And we are at a point where we need to ask, do we need the Middle East today?
Do you know why most people turn around and left the EU, to what I think? It's because in fact Brussels was overstepping.
Yes and no. Most people left the EU because they were promised a great gift that wasn't material. One of the key factors that was going on during the Brexit, and the conversation was, we'll get a deal, it'll be a great deal. You know, a minor Donald Trump will be returning £320 million a year, a week to the NHS. The battle bus that they're both fucking Boris Dozy Bollock Johnson and Nigel Farage swore by, didn't happen. We got fucked on the exit because Europe would never make a good deal that makes it better than being part of their pact. They wouldn't. Why would they? If let's take this, switch this round. You're the Chancellor of Britain, and unfortunately, whether you like it or not, Scotland has demanded the right to leave. They've won it legally in the British courts. They're leaving. Are you going to give Scotland a deal that is better than being part of the EU, but part of the UK? No. I know you're not, because most people are selfish. We need to acknowledge who we are. So the rest of Britain is not going to give Scotland a good deal. Scotland is going to get fucked in the current geopolitics if it was to leave the UK.
They tried to leave the UK at one point.
Yeah, no, it's done multiple times. It's tried. Scotland would be utterly fucked because we would feel vengeful. So Europe feels vengeful. But if me and Christopher come to power and we say to Europe, we want to come back and we just want to make sure that London is the legal centre of the laws in the UK, that kind of deal with our nuclear assets, our restored, if me and you then took the work and money necessary to restore our military and plough billions, more than what the fucking the STEM is doing now. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of billions would have to be put back in the military. And the Europeans, they would say yes. I genuinely think they would say yes. You could cut a deal with an expanded British military to act as a bulwark on behalf of Europe, of us returning to Europe at a different speed than the rest of the Europeans. And we say, we write our own laws, we keep our own pound and our own banking system, but relatively speaking, militarily, freedom of movement, freedom of commerce, we're back with Europe. That deal would cross that ground so fast you wouldn't even see it hitting the floor. Rejoining the single market is what Labour's doing that anyway, because it has to. The world economics is so volatile that Labour has to return to the single market.
The issue with returning to the single market is the fact most people felt it all stems from Brussels. Brussels kept.
That's the problem.
Issues.
You were told by the British press.
Yeah, I would say what we were told that Brussels was overstepping.
The problem being is the judges that were making these decisions were British judges reading British law in a Brussels court. That's all they were doing. People don't realise this. These weren't judgments from an uncaring Brussels politician. They're not idiots, the Brussels. We need to stop treating the Europeans like they're idiots. They're not. They're incredibly intelligent people. So how do they manipulate Britain to becoming part of the European Federation dream? Get British judges to do it. Yes, there was a resentment. Yes, you felt that we're being led by Brussels. Yes, you felt you didn't have a democratic say over that because you didn't feel that the MSPs, the members of the European Parliament, were really a good representation of you, were they?
No.
No. Okay. You wondered why do we have a Parliament and a European Parliament? These are questions that have never been approached by the Europeans. They don't like to talk about them. Why do we have an independent state government? Why do we have a European Parliament? It's uncomfortable conversations, but they're conversations that we Britons had in pubs, in clubs, in nursing homes. Many of our elders, many of yours and my grandparents that are still alive today, not necessarily mine and yours because ours are dead, but I'm saying of that generation, they remember the British Empire, Chris. That's the fucking problem. The people who voted Brexit, the majority of them, didn't care what mine and your kids would think about. They cared, we're the British. We're a nuclear-armed great Royal Britannia. But we're not anymore. The British Navy is nowhere near. The fucking fucking Conservatives have gutted the British military horrifically.
Yeah, that's pissed me off.
The British military is nothing what it used to be. 14 years of
the thing that I don't get with the Conservatives obviously stripping the military. Why did you do it? Because how you meant to defend?
Chris, they absolutely believed that NATO would be able to protect them.
Fuck that shit.
No. You see, Chris. Remember, Germany hasn't had a military for 40 years.
That's because the fact they're scared to bring it back up.
No. Germany's never had a military for 40 years because Germany has been under the protection of NATO. The Conservatives thought, we want some of that. We want to be living under the protection of NATO and not pay a military budget. Because if Germany across the way can do it and build up their infrastructure and their industries and their corporations, why can't we, the British? The problem being is, without Britain and France, we were the bulwark of Europe, with America filling in the other gaps. Now it's Poland and a little bit of France, and some parts of Italy starting to repair their military. Spain's starting. Everyone in Europe is starting to repair their military. We need to do the same. We need to triple our spending on the fucking British Navy. We need to lay the foundations for about 40 fucking frigates, in my opinion.
I was going to say, we need to get back to the massive power he was in them.
Exactly. And then we can negotiate with our European allies on a more fairer basis. Because their industries are bigger than ours. Their corporate means are bigger than ours. We levy our British military as an asset to being part of Europe at a speed we want. That's how we financially do it.
Financially, yeah.
And I think that's what people don't realise is much of the critical point.
Have you heard of obviously the latest thing I saw in the newspaper the other day about marmalade being renamed due to EU rules, apparently?
That's bollocks. Chris, EU rules don't do that. This is why the fear-mongering of the British press is so potent 20 years ago. It's not that potent today. Most people of a new generation don't pay attention to the British press on the same level that they did 20 years ago. In the 2016 election, the British press held about 55-60% of the British people's attention. 10 years on, they don't. I think it's like 30%. And again, that's decreasing every year. Every year it's decreasing.
Because I did a little, tiny bit of reading, and they won't be able to rename the marmalade anyway. So.
Of course not. Absolutely not. It's people do not understand the financial capacity that they don't have the bodily function. There is this call to fear Europe, and it's unnecessary. Britain, we are not an empire anymore. We're not even a great major fucking power anymore. We're a minor power with nukes. We're probably more powerful than North Korea, but not as powerful as Pakistan. And that's hard for some Britons to realise. We're not this great nation anymore. I'd like us to be.
Part of it.
Recognising that we're not a great nation anymore, Chris, is part of the problem. It's recognising we're not, so we can start building to be.
But then that's based upon the generation that's currently around.
Yeah, of course. They think that we're something we're not. Our fucking fleet is abysmal. I think we've got less than 60 ships. For a country that spent its entire fucking empire as a hydropower. There's a particular word for that.
Because there's loads of things, obviously, regarding, going back into the EU thing. The EU single market. I see nothing but benefits as long as it's...
That's the word, Chris. That's the word. 𝐸𝐶ocracy. A maritime empire or sea-based dominion.
Hence the reason
𝐸𝐶ocracy. For an empire, for 250 years, that was a 𝐸𝐶ocracy, that our entire society was built on the power of at sea. We have fucking crumbled.
I say we've dropped the ball massively. You covered a lot of points already.
I know, because the problem is the reintegration of Europe is a critical point that we all need to pay attention to as Europeans. We are Europeans. We are from Europe. And the statements from people like, who is it? I'm trying to remember his fucking name now. Second World War Prime Minister. Big guy.
Churchill.
Churchill said if Britain has to choose between Europe or the Atlantic, we should sail off into the Atlantic. That does not apply anymore. We do not have an empire or dominions. We have lost much of all that made us sailing off into the Atlantic.
That's because the Conservatives come along and stripped it all.
Yeah. Pax Britannica was from 1815 to 1914, a century-long period of relative peace on the world's oceans enforced by the Royal Navy. The Royal Navy used to secure trade lanes, secure a projection power globally, and had its navy protect much of the society. The problem being is we don't even have a major navy anymore.
So I know for a fact, I know that this question is going to come up because in fact it's probably, because it's spoke about obviously continuously about obviously migration. Would it benefit?
Go on.
Like would migration actually, as called, be more controlled if we join the EU?
Yes, absolutely. Because we'd be under the EU chartered agreements. When we left the EU, our migration problems went up because France saw us as an easy way to dump their shit in our backyard. Let's just say that. Because the French have a problem with migration, because the scrutinage agreement, the agreement of open borders across the rest of Europe, which we were never part of, meant that France had to fucking offload excessive people who had failed through their immigration system somewhere, and they want to dump it into Britain.
So I know if we join, well, when we eventually go back to the EU, because it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah, it is. That's the problem.
I know it's become easier to move across Europe.
We have less than 20 surface ships. From a navy that used to have 1,300. We have 20 acting surface ships. Six Type 45 destroyers, 7 Type 23 frigates, and not all those frigates are even seaworthy, and 2 carriers. the Queen Elizabeth, and the Prince of Wales. We have a lot of submarines, let's be fair about this. A lot of Britain's naval power is underwater these days.
It used to be done at the moment.
Yeah, of course. But the vanguards are crumbling. They are literally crumbling. The high maintenance needed and the crew shortages is a massive fucking problem on our fleet. We have a lot of reduced forward presence. We've lost most of our Type 23 frigates, such as HMS Lancaster, has forced the abandonment of a permanent deployment like the Gulf. We used to be in the Gulf permanently. We're not anymore. The Type 26 to 31 frigates may arrive in 2035. May arrive. Not they will arrive, they may arrive.
Damn.
The British Navy is a fucking shell of itself, Chris. Absolute shell of itself. And it's scary to say that because we used to be this great naval fucking power. And I think the British people have to really pay attention to the reality that we're not. And we haven't been for a fucking long time. At least since the 2020s, we haven't been a major naval power, Chris. I think the material problems that we're having is one of our major problems. I think the return to Europe will benefit us. I think the restoration of Europe will benefit us. And it might be a hard pill for our elders to swallow.
So you do realize they're demanding three things before they start talking.
What's the three things they're demanding?
Obviously, the fishing ships to be more access to our British waters. I
don't see that as a bad thing. It's of all the things that we can sacrifice, that's not a massive thing from my point of view.
That's to fall in line with the European court justice system.
That might be a stumbling block for the nationalists.
Yeah.
But I could see that as a sacrifice. In the short term, Chris, we need the single market. In the today's short term, we need the single market to stabilise Britain.
I think that's the two main ones. Can't seem to find the third one. Conversation China, the Blue Marina Foundation claiming these demands are absolutely outrageous. How are they?
The bulk of much of our Royal Naval problem, Chris, is how many of our older vessels we were relying on for so long. We kept putting back out our old fleets, our old ships. So we've been relying on them, stretching them across decades. Whilst the erosion was obvious to those following naval policy closely, it remained of the frigates of the national conversion. And now that we are retiring entire waves that we can't keep deploying these frigates, we only have a single destroyer in the entire country that is seaworthy. I think the more fishing waters, and what was the other one?
The fall in line with the ECJ, European Court Justice System.
That's a hard swallow for Britain, but I think it's going to have to be done.
We basically almost on par with each other anyway.
We are. It's not a massive loss.
I say every basically, as I call it, going both in similar straight line. We just
there is a difference in certain areas. If someone like Nigel Farage comes into power, we will radically move away from the European Court. And it will be, I think it will be a monstrously destructive force that enters our country.
And the other one is UK mobility scheme, youth mobility scheme. So I think that's a freedom movement for people to go to and from school and all that lot. Talks with the UK is a youth mobility scheme, a proposal which Downing Street has so far rejected. Which would allow 18 to 35-year-olds to move and work freely between countries for up to 2 years. To me, that's adding more people to the workforce.
Yeah.
But then that also gives us the chance to do the same.
Yeah, but then from my point of view, Chris, Britain absolutely needs to work out where we're going, because I don't think America's power will survive into the 30s. And we are now at that crossroads where we have to decide as a nation where the fuck we're going.
We need to look after ourselves. And to look after
But how do
ourselves,
we look after ourselves with no resources?
To look after ourselves, we need to look towards our direct neighbours. I say direct, it would be the EU and Russia.
Yeah, of course. And that's scary for many politicians to say, but it needs to be said. Russia has all the cheap shit we need.
The thing that boggles me is how come we haven't done it sooner?
Sure, Chris, seriously, you know what our politicians are like.
If it's purely down to... I'm trying to think of the word now. Discrimination from our older generation against other people, then you're holding Britain back.
No, they're doing more than holding it back. They're crippling it. And the older generation don't care because they know they're going to be dead by the late 2030s.
You're not just holding Britain back, you're dooming it.
I don't know about dooming it. Me and you can recover it. It's just going to take us a lot of work.
Well, or putting us on, not dooming it, putting us on the doorstep of potential doom. The
British political establishment have fucked the country for 14 years under conservatism. The conservatism has been directly responsible for the destruction of our relationship with Europe, which we have to repair. And if talking...
Yeah, that's because of the fact that they thought we would all vote to stay.
Of course. And not just that. That was David Cameron's stupidity. But because people like Nigel Farage keeps lying every fucking day. And we have to be unapologetically clear that Britain is not this power we used to be. We don't have the metals we have. We don't have the industry we've had. Remember, the Conservatives have sold most of this stuff on.
Remember,
we've only got one steelwork left.
Yeah. Obviously, I said that obviously the politicians need to be on minimum wage. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love you.
No, because then you could then turn around and go, you want better pay, fulfill the promises that you have spoken.
Oh my God. Wow.
How would that not stop the lying?
Oh, Chris, the reality is power does not work like that. Power doesn't work like that.
Well, they'd have to take a pay cut.
You need visionaries. You need people willing to do what needs to be done. We need to both massively embrace the sciences on another level. One of the things we do have that is beneficial, we have a highly educated youth. We need to channel that youth into the hard sciences, the materials, mathematics, engineering, physics departments, all of that. That needs to be one axis of how we operate it. The second axis is fixing our relationship with Russia and Europe.
Which involves politics.
Yeah, which we have to do that. It's not him. Third axis, rebuild the British Navy.
Then how would you stop the politicians from lying apart from affecting their pocket?
Are you asking me if I was Prime Minister John?
Yeah.
I'd take out a Glock 9mm and put it to the head of the first line politician, pull the trigger, and then write a prime ministerial privilege. No. You don't understand the level of what happens when a political power comes out the barrel of a gun and you blow a brains out of a lying politician. The rest of them get the message very quickly, as would the corporate world. You shoot. Let me take an example. Let's take Nigel Farage as an example. I hate that man undyingly for what the damage he's done to our country. I'm elected Prime Minister of the Labour Party. It's not going to happen. I don't like Labour in so many different ways. Nigel Farage lies to the detriment or harm of the British people. I walk up, put a bullet in his head. Live on camera. And I say, every politician who lies to the United Kingdom, I will take prime ministerial privilege powers, which are the King's powers, which allows me to do this shit and blow your fucking brains out. Every lying politician in Britain and all the corporate elite, gone. Jumping on boats and planes out the country. Never to be seen again. One dead evil politician solves a lot of Britain's problems.
Without killing somebody, because I know people would turn around and do that, how would you affect...
Without killing people, yeah. I would then change the law to say that lying to the British public has a 15-year prison sentence.
Fuck 15 years, life.
Life prison sentence. So you don't want to shoot. Nigel Farage, you've lied to the British public, you've caused fear, you've caused disharmony to the British. It's against the disharmony law, you're going away for the rest of your life. Bang, gone. And you do that to every lying politician. It changes the tone again. But I think the bullet in the head works better. Quicker and cheaper. I don't have to feed the cunt in prison.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I'll tell you, you need to think in fact of the massive majority. I know for a fact there will be the group that will turn around and go, yeah, it needs to be done, it needs to be the harsh truth. But
Lockwood's got the thing, shoot the cunt. There are going to be some supporters out there like that.
I'm not going to lie, that is a very easy, straightforward fix.
And you're like, he's got a point.
No,
but no, I can't let you do that.
I've thought about that. I'm like, as massively extreme, it would work really effectively, but I could guarantee you'd lose the vote of half the public.
No, you wouldn't. That's a misconception.
Well, not vote half of it. You would bring up enough.
No, I don't believe so. If you were to shoot one of the worst lying, evil politicians in Britain, the shock value would reverberate across society.
Yeah, but I don't think it would just take one.
No, only Farage.
No,
you do it to Farage,
no.
the whole shitstorm goes, because they now know it costs. They know the cost.
Then just go fucking higher than Farage. What's higher than Farage?
He's the worst in the country.
Yeah, he's the worst in the country, but who's higher than Farage, which is almost as bad as Farage?
What do you mean by higher?
Like, so see, what is it? He ain't exactly, he's obviously...
He's the party leader of Reform UK.
He's the party leader of Reform UK, so who's higher than him? But it's a lying scumbag.
Probably the leader of one of the major British press papers.
He goes. Farage falls in line.
Wow. Well, I mean, yeah, shoot or arrest, put into prison one of the press barons who have mistreated the British people via lying to them. Probably the Daily Express, probably the Sun, someone from Rupert Murdoch's press, and then ban Rupert Murdoch from owning media in Britain permanently. Make a British law banning Rupert Murdoch's press from owning press in Britain.
I won't turn around and make it British. I'll turn around and call him a terrorist.
Because
so the moment he steps on any British soil, he's immediately sentenced to not life, death.
Rupert Murdoch is the Murdoch Empire of immediate empire is responsible for much of the pain and grief and misery of inter-British societies. So why does hypothetical your nephew or your cousin's son dislike the brown people? Because people like Murdoch made him think that way. Why does my sister and cousin's children play without any problem? Because they've spent their childhood not seeing skin colour. That's the fundamental problem. And we're talking about two very British families. Your cousin's children, and I don't believe that they do dislike, because the younger generation are far more open-minded. But hypothetical, your cousin's children...
The influence the media has over those children.
Yeah. And then my sister's and cousin's kids playing absolutely fine with each other, even though they're mixed-raced and non-mixed-raced. Because the reality is they've grown up around each other and never had that problem. So when they see what the press says, that's bullshit. My cousin's fine. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But yet your cousin's child doesn't have that same interaction. You know what I'm saying? One of her sisters hasn't married a black man or a brown man or someone like that, an Arab. Do you know what I'm saying? The reality is that's why we have a disconnection between severals, and the Murdochs feed on that disconnection. The one greatest thing politically you could do in the United Kingdom right now, the single greatest political thing you could do is ban Rupert Murdoch's press. Prime ministerial privilege, I outlaw Rupert Murdoch's media. That in itself would solve enormous amounts of racist problems across the country. It would kill billions worth of fucking profit. It would damage politicians' careers. It would probably collapse the careers of 100 or 200 journalists. But it would have a detrimental effect at fixing Britain's inter-community abilities. And you would then say, why have you done that? The amount of time that Rupert Murdoch's press has lied to the British public continuously about migration has directly damaged British integration rates. So when we say, me and you, that we want the British communities to be integrated, we want the Muslims to feel like this is their country, we want the white people to not fear Muslims and brown people and black people. How do you build a better integration? You stop people who feed on fear. So yes, you ban some of the really fucking extremist clerics that are allowed in the country even today. There are Saudi clerics that I, as a Muslim, would never let in the country. You know what I'm saying? There are motherfuckers, and as a Muslim, Chris, if you gave them to me, I'd hang them. Yeah? Because under the Sharia, they cause harm. They cause harm. I would hang those clerics. At the same time, you'd probably hang fucking Rupert Murdoch's family for the misery that they've caused the British people. So in this hypothetical situation, I get the bad fucking Muslims, you get the bad white supremacists, we get rid of all of them, the country heals. The country would heal. Because one of the factual things I want to mention, those Saudi Arabian ultra supremacist clerics, they turn around and say, without Islam, Britain is a whorehouse. There are clerics that literally say that. It's a detritus, it's disgusting. You have to take over. You have to kill all of the infidels. That's the language that fucks me off. You listen. But
that's the language that's fed through the media to the British
But
public.
the media then says, look at all Muslims. They don't say the Saudi elite clerics, supremacists, the tiny 1% of the Muslim community of Britain. They say all the Muslims. Yeah. Do you now see why I have a problem with Rupert Murdoch's press? Because I've never spoken like that. You've known me more than a decade. Have I ever asked for anyone in the British mixed communities, white or otherwise, to be harmed?
No, because I'd also fucking hit you for it.
I'm not natured like that. You know, that's just not the kind of person I am. I don't want any white, brown person to be harmed. I believe that you should live your life as a good and lawful way possible. There are some elements of our society, both on my side and on the Western side, that need to be cut off and surgically removed without reservation. And I would. And I'm the kind of person that if given the authority to do so, I'd walk in. My day 3 or 4 as a Prime Minister of the UK would be me walking into the British Muslim Council and telling them, I see any grants given to extremist Arab supremacist clerics, you are all going to prison. Like the whole council is going to prison. The Muslim Council. There wouldn't be another. Those clerics would be gone by day 5. Because their licenses given to them by the Muslim Council will be gone, and the immigration will be straight out the door. And that's the civil response. The uncivil response is I ran them up and shoot them all. And I fucking would. Because I know that that's what the ultra-liberal media feeds on. And the ultra-liberal media will then call me an extremist for getting rid of the people that they want to make money on to say that all Muslims are bad.
Well, I won't care about that, especially better in the country.
Of course, absolutely. And I don't even think that the British Ummah wouldn't object, because we know they're toxic, evil bastards amongst us. We're not idiots, but it's not all of Muslims. It's this tiny slither that for some fucking reason, the British establishment have allowed to come into the country.
To cause fear.
To divide and conquer.
Yeah.
That's the method. But I think we've covered our 2 points today. I think the return to the EU market is inevitable. I think Britain returning to Europe is inevitable. And the disintegration of NATO is happening in real time in front of us.
I reckon if NATO dissolves, I reckon the EU...
Within 5 years. Within 5 years we'd be part of Europe.
The EU would build its own version of it.
We need a regional power anyway.
Yeah.
Europe needs to spend more on military, especially in the Britain.
I'd say when NATO dissolves, because at some point it will anyway.
No, Chris, I think we've passed that point. I think because the European powers have said to America, fuck off. Just fuck off. We're not coming to your Iranian war.
So hence when I said when NATO dissolves, even if it's in the case of dissolving, our own, let's call it regional NATO, will pull up. We'll take a hit, naturally. We'll have to develop some of our systems ourselves, but...
Good point I need to make out is that 2/3 of the Senate does need to revoke the Unalienable Withdrawal Act. So the Senate needs to... The President might ask the Senate, but it does need 2/3 of the Senate to say they will withdraw from NATO. The President does not have the power. From 22nd of December 2023, prohibits the President from unalienably withdrawing from NATO without approval of 2/3 of the Senate, a majority or act of Congress. So he can't actually withdraw from NATO by himself, the budget Dorito. But because we, the Europeans, have told America we're not helping you with the Iran war. That might be enough to get the senators to say we're getting out. And I think that's, I think that NATO's finished.
I do reckon our own version of NATO will rise up from it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One that focuses on Europe more than the rest of fucking the world. I think that's. I think NATO's ending as we know it anyway. I just think that people don't understand the concept of how much America does for Europe. I'm not saying I want the end of NATO tomorrow. I'm really not. I want to be very clear. I think a winding down of NATO would be best in the next 5 years for us to the 2030s. I think Europe and America need to go separate ways because we have different goals, different desires. I think that the relationship between NATO and EU defence structure is radically going to shift. I think that once America pulls out of Europe, I think that Australia, New Zealand, Canada, they're going to make their own defensive needs to the necessities of their countries. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be around America. I think it's inevitable the NATO model is finished.
The current NATO
model. I don't think it's going to survive Donald Trump. Donald Trump is going to lose power at some point. Whether it's from his death, because he becomes the dictator of America, that's entirely possible. He has said he doesn't want to leave office until he dies. Yeah. Remember, they say Donald Trump 2028. They say that regularly. I don't even know how he'd do it, but he's seriously looking at taking a third term.
Wouldn't he have to rewrite some law to actually do that?
Oh yeah. But I don't think he'll make November this year, when Congress comes to vote. I think something is going to happen between here and November, or in November once the elections are in and the Democrats have stormed Congress and the Senate, he's impeached, and he will go to prison for the rest of his life, I suspect.
I'm not gonna lie, if he gets impeached, that'll be all over the fucking news, won't it?
Him getting impeached, I think, is inevitable. I think his collapse is absolutely inevitable, Chris. I think he has made too many enemies at home in America for him to survive this. He has to wipe his enemies out. He has to wipe the Democrats out, and he can't do that. I mean, that's the American system gone if he does. If he succeeds, America will be transitioning into an empire. Let's be very, very fact about that. America.
They do say the presidential thing will end with Trump.
I find either he's impeached and the American system radically changes to a America not led world, and it will, or America will implode, or America will transition into an empire.
For some reason, I see it transition into an empire. For some reason,
I think it's possible. It's not in the impossible cases. I genuinely think America could transfer into an empire. I don't believe that that's impossible, as contrary to what people think.
How much bloodshed would that cause?
I don't know, because there are a lot of democratic states. Not just as Democrat blue, I'm talking about democratic in nature. I think Donald Trump underestimates that. Would Donald Trump want to be Emperor of America? I think so. I think he's such an egomaniac that that's something he'd want.
If he has managed to do that, I know for a fact within the first 5 years he'll be killed off and someone else will take his place.
I think do you know that Caesar didn't last long when he created the Roman Empire for the Roman Republic? He lasted only a couple of years. I think he was emperor for only dictator for life for about 3 or 4 years before he was killed. But whoever took over the empire afterwards, that was an empire then.
Yeah.
Because he'd done the damage necessary to create the empire. So I think in this hypothetical situation that America forms into an empire, it might go to Baron, his son. His son might become the first proper American emperor, or another powerful oligarchical family of America takes over.
Rothschilds.
No, because people, shockingly, they're not as powerful as people think they are politically. Everyone talks about them, that's a conspiracy. I have looked quite extensively into how much actual power The banking clans have. They don't. They do control the banks. Let's be very, very clear about
Actually,
it.
I know
There
massive
are
in the
entire
financial.
banking clans.
Yeah.
They're not just the Rothschilds. There are others as well. But they're not that politically connected because they're wary of it. Because their wariness comes from, if we stay in our lane, the rest of the world will leave us alone. So it isn't...
The Rothschilds are more controlling just one aspect.
Yeah, money. I don't believe that they have an oligarchical position where they would want to do that because it would jeopardise the power they have in the banks.
And they're the ones that want to go digital currency.
Whole sections of the banking world want to go digital, depending on which side of the argument
Yeah.
you're on. Not all of it, though, as far as I can tell.
I don't see that happening within the next
I don't
century.
know. I don't know, Chris. It depends on how the world economy moves. We are moving closer to a digital society.
Closer, but we're far off from that.
Yeah, I think we're definitely moving in the direction. But that has been more than an hour, so
Yeah.
I think we need to say, as always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, Sean, or Yaka, depends on who you're asking.
I'm Chris, hope you have a smashing day.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.